Okay, well, back to the ready state. Now, clearly we're deep into our shelter-in-place MO, right? This is how we're living. And one of the things that we're hearing a lot more of is people are like, hey, my setup at home, I don't know how to make it better because I don't feel good at the end of the day. I'm on Zoom a lot. I'm not moving around a lot. So this is our primer. This is the first aid kit, emergency first responder to getting into a better situation. Now, here's the deal. There's no right position or wrong position. Your body is dynamic, it's anti-fragile, you can sit on the ground, you can move, but there are a couple guidelines here. And the first one is, the goal is not sitting versus standing. Wrong conversation. The right conversation is working more or working less. Now, Harvard clinically defines sedentary behavior is falling below 1.5 metabolic equivalents of work. So if you were ever on the old Stairmaster in like the hotel in the 90s, you were like, what's a Met? And you would be like, I'm working out at 4 Mets. What is that? Well, the idea is, it turns out that that's a simple idea, that if I sit down in a chair with a back or on my couch, boom, I fall below 1.5 metabolic equivalents. And that is a sedentary behavior. And what we're trying to do is keep our sedentary behavior under 4 to 6 hours of sedentariness a day while I'm awake. Remember, as a human being, my goal is to move as much as possible. And that can take a lot of different shapes and a lot of different forms. Now, one of the things that we know is that some people are having a hard time going to sleep. And one of the reasons is we're not moving enough during the day to accumulate enough sleep pressure to actually feel like we want to fall asleep. So an easy way into that, to having tissues that are more robust, to cycling out of that sedentary sort of hormonal response to not moving, is to change how we think about our environment. So you're familiar with our idea of sort of being able to take this max rep breath, right? This 1 rep max. So one of the things that I always have available to me is in whatever position I'm in, I always just try to say, hey, how can I maintain my breathing volume? Because if I end up slouching, it's not about back pain or neck pain. Yeah, this isn't a great shape. Your neck may get stiff, but you're not gonna get injured. The issue here is I can't really breathe and my breathing is altered. And that means that's a whole nother cascade of dysfunction that may make me feel more stressed or may challenge my, et cetera, et cetera. But what I can do is always be finding a shape, wherever I'm in, where I can just take a massive breath. And it turns out you'll automatically self-correct into more functional, more resilient positions if you use that 1 rep max breath. So if you find you're like, oh, how's my shape right now? You're like, oh, get into a better position. Then you can slouch and lean, and as long as you're just thinking, hey, how do I get more breathing out of it, it's better. So with that in mind, here is the crash course on setting up a better workstation. So our basic tenet, we have a couple rules. 1, elbow to ground, plus 1 inch. So the idea here is if I'm at an impromptu workstation, like I have this little bar table in my garage, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Well, it turns out this is absolutely the wrong size for me. And it's still the wrong size for me when I'm here. And so what I find up doing is it doesn't feel good to work in a more active position. So I'll automatically protect myself or get into a different shape, which usually looks like sitting, okay? So now the goal here is elbow to the ground, plus 1 inch. So if I have a laptop tray, boy, that's easier. Now suddenly this starts to make sense to me. I can lean up against it, and then I'm automatically gonna be working in a better position. Okay, so if I don't have a laptop tray, it turns out I always have 17 copies of various foreign translations of our books lying around. And what I want you to appreciate is the same rule applies. What I want to be doing is going from elbow to ground plus a little bit more. That allows me to get out of this internally rotated position. And this is crux. When I'm a little bit higher, I can get my shoulders back a little bit more into a more mid-range position, and then I automatically have a better relationship between shoulder, torso, and head. Because we don't solve neck problems by stretching the neck. We solve neck problems by looking at the neck, shoulder, and thoracic spine. So if I can take a big breath, turns out this position isn't great. What position allows me to get into a better shape? Or a shape that restores this trifecta of this relationship between. So that elbow to ground does a lot to make your shoulders more robust so that you can actually support your 11-pound head, okay? So keep in mind that if I'm working at different heights, I may need to adjust during the day. So having these books out, or maybe a couple sets, allows me to quickly drop my height and raise my height as I need to fidget, which takes us to the second idea. Whenever you're at a standing station, we want you to have a place to put your foot. And one of the reasons you can appreciate, especially our athletic populations, we are extension-driven animals. So we're seeing our athletes who are missing extension, which puts a lot of more passive force into our low backs. Now, it's not about injury, it's not about spondy, it's none of that. It's about, hey, it doesn't feel comfortable to do a lot of standing. Well, it turns out the bartenders fixed this for us a long time ago. Back before the shutdown, there are these places called bars. I can't believe they're not essential. And there is a bar at the bottom, a rail at the bottom of the bar. They figured out that if you came and leaned up against something that was bar height and had a place to put your foot, your spine was supported. We took some of the extension load out of your spine by putting in a little flexion, and you could drink all day long. Well, let's use that Captain Morgan technology and let's apply it to our own ideas. So even if you have a stack of books, that is enough to be able to take some of the extension load out. What you'll see is it really doesn't matter. As long as you've got some option to be able to get this foot out, up a little bit and pelvis out of extension, you're gonna feel a lot better. Third idea is that we think no workstation is complete without a place to put your foot and a bar stool. And the reason is, when I'm perching, which is what it's called when I'm at the edge, I'm still above 1.5 metabolic equivalents. My body is still working. I'm still weight bearing, right? I haven't turned the whole system off and found the position of most entropy where most musculature tissue systems are off and I'm just hanging on my connective tissue, which is fine, but it's just less good. It's less good for your sedentary physiology. It's less good for the mechanics. It's less good for your robustness because I want you to finish work and feel like you can move or dance or go for a walk or hike, right? Let your experiences at the end of the day dictate what's going on. So it turns out if I have a stool or a high chair, suddenly I have a prop to do what we call fidgeting or messing around. So I want you to appreciate that there are a million different ways and different positions to fidget in this thing, and still including perching. So now with this perching, you can see that you're like, oh, I need a little bit more here. So I give myself a little bit more height, elbow to the ground still rules, and this puts me into a better shape where I can still take a breath, I can still perch, and I can fidget my brains out. One of the ways that we can keep tissues healthy and tissues loaded and the sedentary physiology turned off is to try to get more movement in. And it doesn't take an ergonomics degree to give yourself more movement choice so that you feel better at the end of these long, epic Zoom marathons. You got this. See you next time.